Sunstop, the miracle of the sun stopping. About 3,400 years ago, the Israelites were on their way back to the land of Canaan, after being freed from 400 years slavery in Egypt. They spent 40 years in the desert of Zin, during which the first generation of the Exodus, led by Moses, all passed away. Then the second generation of the Exodus, led by Joshua, entered Canaan. The land of Canaan was the land that originally belonged to the Israelites. However, other tribes had settled there over the course of 400 years. So the land of Canaan, which God had given them, could not simply be taken back upon entering it, but was land they had to fight for to regain. They couldn't drive out all the tribes at once, so they had to defeat each tribe one by one. In their conquest, the Gibeonite tribe made a peace treaty with the Israelites. And then in the fight against the 5 Amorite kings, a miracle occurred. The sun stood still. Joshua 10:12-14. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord, in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jasher, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky, and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before, or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Did a miracle really happen that the sun stopped? What do you think? Regarding this occurrence, the seminary of the former faith is teaching that this was a tremendous miracle. Let's look at the interpretation of Christian theology. John Calvin's commentary. Some wonder, how could the sun remain over Gibeon, while others give unnecessarily explanations? I am not concerned about the duration for which the sun stood still. Clearly, the sun which was setting rose again. It is sufficient to acknowledge that for an entire night, night was turned into day. The tremendous miracle would have undoubtedly been celebrated in historical records, if there were any. Park Yun-sun's commentary. The sun stopping is a great miracle. From this, we can tell that God listens well to the prayers of leaders. Miracles transcend the laws of nature, so we can accept the scripture literally. Matthew Henry's commentary. The sun moves without resting to light up the whole earth. However, when the Israelites needed help, God stopped it and showed kindness. Pastor Kim Eung-jo. There is no problem with accepting that God's power stopped the rotation of the sun. But can the sun be stopped? When Joshua prayed sincerely to God, it says that the sun and the moon stopped going down for almost a day. But do you think that it really stopped? James 2:26. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. If there is only theory and the reality does not happen, like the theory states, then the theory is wrong. Like this, no matter how strong your belief is, if it's not actually true in reality, then that belief is wrong. It's common sense that the sun does not move. Heliocentric theory, which states that it is not the sun that moves, but the earth, was proposed only about 400 years ago. In 1610, when Galileo observed the celestial bodies through the telescope, he discovered that the earth revolved and rotated around the sun, and as a result, he advocated for heliocentrism. However, the scientists and religious leaders who supported the previously accepted geocentric theory, which held that the sun moved, did not believe Galileo's claims and brought him to trial. As a result, Galileo had to undergo several trials. Nevertheless, the sun is a fixed star. The sun is a fixed star at the center of the solar system. Day and night occur due to the rotation of the Earth, and the 4 seasons are caused by the Earth's orbit around the sun. Within the solar system, the sun spins on its own axis, but it, however, does not revolve or orbit around, although it appears from the Earth that the sun is moving. In reality, it is the Earth that is moving. Then, does this mean that the Earth's rotation stopped? The Earth rotates at about 1670 km per hour at the equator. If the Earth's rotation was to suddenly stop, then due to the law of inertia, it will be disaster. All objects would be thrown into the air, powerful typhoons would occur, and there would be tsunamis and earthquakes as well. Even if the Earth were to gradually stop rotating, other types of disasters would occur. If such disasters had happened, there would be records of it. However, since there are no such records in the historical records of Egypt, a neighboring country, it can be concluded that the Earth's rotation did not stop. The incident, during the time of geocentric theory about 3,400 years ago, at the time of Joshua, they lived in an era before geocentric theory was established. They only perceived that the sun moved because it moved from the east to the west, based on what they saw with their eyes. That's why Joshua confidently prayed to God, saying, "Sun, stand still." When you look at the stories in the Bible, it is important to know which time period they're from, then you will not have any misunderstandings. 1 Corinthians 13:12. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then you shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Apostle Paul, who wrote Corinthians, is a person who lived 2,000 years ago. At that time, mirrors were made of bronze, which is why he expressed that things were blurry as if in a mirror. The Bible was written a long time ago, so looking at it with today's understanding will lead to misunderstandings. Then, what does it mean when it says the sun stopped for a day? Led by Joshua, the Israelites was on the verge of winning the battle, but the sun was about to set, and fighting in the dark was disadvantage for them. Therefore, what they really needed, and what would be the greatest miracle, was to win quickly before nightfall. Joshua 10:11. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth-horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail, then were killed by the swords of the Israelites. God answered Joshua's prayer by sending hailstones from the sky, which destroyed their enemies. The Israelites were able to win so quickly as if time had stopped. Then can people get killed by hailstones? It's hard to understand how people could be killed by hail, because typical hailstones are small and non-threatening, much like being hit by the raindrops. When Son Sang-nim was in Italy and working on writing books, he also asked Jesus about this. And coincidentally, he saw a news report on TV about how a hailstone, the size of a watermelon, had rained down, and he recorded it down. The hailstone that was shown on the news weighed about 7 to 8 kilos. Even today, there are instances where the fall of giant hailstones feature in the news all over the world. The sign that God was with Israelites. Because the Amorites were attacking and opposed the Israelites, God sent a great hailstorm, like a downpour, to destroy their enemies. God instilled fear in the enemies of the Israelites and sent hail upon those who fled. God boosted the morale of Israelites, giving them the confidence to fight boldly. As a result, Joshua and the Israelites ultimately won the war. The war, which was thought to have needed several more days, ended quick enough that when the Israelites looked up at the sky, the sun was still up and had not set. It felt like the sun and the moon had stopped. That is why it led them to record in the Bible that the moon and the sun had stood still. Ultimately, the incident in the main scripture is not to emphasize the sun actually stopping. It is to show how they were able to achieve victory in a situation where it could not have been achieved with human power alone, but only happened because the miracle of time occurred by God being with them. Conclusion. Look at the Bible after considering when it was written, the time period. The Bible was written in the past, so reading the Bible with 21st century thinking will lead to big misunderstandings. By looking at the Bible, considering the time period, you will be able to comprehend the Bible perfectly. Pray to God. Cling on to God. Isaiah 5:56. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Philippians 4:13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. God answered Joshua's prayer, although it was actually the miracle of time. The victory was so miraculous that it was recorded in the Bible that the sun stood still. In this way, the victory and loss in war is in God's hands, and the victory and loss in our lives is also in God's hands. Therefore, we should pray to God, knowing that our victories are in His hands.